Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another stream for the Lost Years of Merlin, Book 3, Chapter 4, called A Distant Chime. So, in the last chapter, Merlin played his psaltery and it burst into flames, and Ernalda, the dwarf queen, said that Valdirg the dragon had arisen and that they need Merlin's help, and he was the only one who could fight this dragon. And then there's this prophecy that Cairpri told him that basically was like, whoever fights this dragon is also going to die at the end. And they were like, oh god, that's so bad. So we'll find out. So chapter 4, A Distant Chime. Cairpri's hand brushed a pair of leaves from my shoulder. Before you go, my boy, you should take this with you. He bent to pick up the blackened string from my psaltery that I had discarded. Carefully, he retrieved it from the leaves and grasped by my feet. Resting there in his open palm, it looked like a twisted, blackened corpse of a snake, killed in its very infancy. I pushed his hand away. Why would I want that? Because you made it, Merlin. Crafted it with your own hands. It's worthless, I sneered. It will only remind me that I failed the test. His tangled brows climbed higher. Perhaps, and perhaps not. But you saw what happened. I did indeed. With my very own sight, find the light, find the light. He brushed back some graying hair. And I saw you never had a chance to play. You were interrupted by Ernalda before you, or the strings, could make any music. We don't know what might have happened if you had been allowed to finish. I glanced at the gnarled roots of the great rowan tree, where I had worked for so many months to make the psaltery, and at the tools, of so many shapes and purposes, that I had finally learned to wield. But now we'll never find out. You said yourself I'll never get another chance. Slowly, he nodded. To make a magical instrument, yes. But it's just possible, though very unlikely, that your chance to play this one may not yet be over. He could be right, you know, said Rhea, stepping through the fallen leaves. There's always a possibility. I scowled at her. You can't make music out of a burned ember. How do you know? Replied Cairpri. You may have powers you don't yet comprehend. Perhaps powers I'll never get to use, dragon or no dragon. Angrily, I snatched the psaltery string from his hand. Look at this, will you? You know as well as I do that unless a young wizard can make music flow from this instrument, his growth, his chance to become, well, whatever he might have become, is ended. The poet's soulful eyes regarded me for a long moment. Yes, my boy, that's true. Yet there is much about all of this that we, most certainly I, don't understand. Remember all the leaves? Asked Rhea. Before you even started to play, you were attracting things from all over, not just the leaves, but magical things, too. Even Ernalda. Maybe the psaltery was already starting to show its power. That's right, added Cairpri. And who can tell? Perhaps that power, drawing all the leaves, all the magic, was also drawing something else. Something that hasn't yet arrived. That's on its way to you even now. Skeptically, I studied the contorted string and what was left of the bridge. I don't believe there's anything left in this. I just don't. But I suppose there's no harm in keeping it for a while. I slipped the remains into my satchel. I cast a glance toward my mother, standing in silence by the rowan's trunk. What I really need is something strong, very strong, to help me against Valdirg. Cairpri touched my arm. I understand, my boy. Believe me, I do. Suddenly, Rhea pointed skyward. What's that? The poet looked up, then hunched as if struck by an invisible club. Like the rest of us, he gazed at a pair of dark, jagged wings emerging from a cloud, and the blood-red mouth bearing enormous teeth, or fangs. As the shape circled high above us, we shrank toward the trunk of the old rowan. Not the dragon, prayed my mother, stepping over a massive root. Then, seeing the shape bank sharply to one side, she shook her head. No, look. It's not big enough. It's more like a gigantic bat. What in Dagda's name is it? Cairpri made a choking noise. It can't be. The last of them died ages ago. He rubbed his hand against the rowan's ragged bark. Stay close to the tree, all of you. Don't move, lest it seize us. What is it? I grabbed his arm. And why do I feel such fear deep down inside? For more than our lives. Because, Merlin, that thing has come not for our lives, though it could easily take them. It has come for your powers. Before he could say anything more, a high, piercing shriek echoed across the wooded hills. It jabbed at me, slicing at my chest like a sword of sound. Then, as a wintry gust slapped the rowan, branches flailed, moaning and creaking, while more leaves and berries scattered across the knoll. In that instant, the winged beast wheeled sharply in the air. Downward it plunged, straight at us. Rhea gasped, "It's seen us!" "What is it?" I demanded. Carepree squinted to see through the waving branches. "A Krelix! Feeds on the powers, the magic of others." He tried to place himself in front of Ellen, wedging her into a crevice in the trunk, but she pushed him away. "Forget about me!" she cried. "Protect him!" Carepree's eyes stayed fixed on the bat-like creature. Those fangs. Aghast, I stared at the dark shape descending, drawing closer by the second. Already I could see the 3 gleaming fangs, and the hooked jaws jutting from the leading edges of the wings. I could almost feel them tearing at my flesh, my ribs, my thundering heart. At least I could draw the beast away from the others. I glanced down at my sword, half buried by leaves at the base of the tree, then suddenly remembered a more powerful weapon. My staff! I tore it free from my belt. Carepree seized my arm. "No, Merlin!" I wrenched free. Clutching the staff, I leaped clear of the knot of roots. The shriek of the Krelix cut through the air, drowning out the poet's own shout. At the same instant, its enormous hook-winged shadow fell across the rowan. The beast skimmed the very top of the tree, shearing off dozens of smaller branches as it passed. Debris showered me. I brandished my weapon, calling on all the powers embedded in this wood. "Now, I need your help." The Krelix careened, ripping at the air with its wings. Then it plunged toward me, the thick brown fur that covered its head and body flattened from the force of the wind. Its mouth opened even wider, thrusting its fangs outward. I realized that the creature lacked any eyes, that, like me, its ability to see came from some other source. As the 3 fangs arched toward me, I stepped back, catching my heel on one of the rowan's roots. Though I struggled to keep my balance, I tumbled over backwards. The staff flew from my hand, rolling down the hillside. I started to push myself to my feet, when my hand struck the leather belt of my scabbard. The sword! I grasped the hilt. As I pulled the blade free, it rang faintly, like a faraway chime. Scrambling to my feet, I had barely enough time to raise the sword before the Krelix struck. It flew straight at me, its wings and voice screaming as one. Now I could see the veined folds of its ears, the dagger-like edges of its claws, the scarlet tip of its fangs. Its shadow raced over the trees below the knoll, then up the grassy slope. Planting my boots, I reared back. "Do not fail me, sword." I braced myself. "You are all that stands between us and death." I swung. All at once, a blaze of scarlet light exploded inside my head. At the same time, a powerful force slammed into me. Even as it threw me backward, it seemed to reach deep into my chest, to rip the strength from my body and the sword from my hands. I spun through the air, unable to breathe. With a thud, I landed, then rolled to a stop. I found myself on my back, on grass and leaves. Yes, it felt like leaves. But where was this place? A short, labored breath. Air at last. I tried to rise, but could not. The clouds spun above me, and something else, something darker than a shadow. "Merlin, watch out!" Though I couldn't tell whether the cry came from within me or without, I forced myself to obey it. Weakly, I rolled to the side. A split second later, something slashed into the ground, barely missing my head. It rang softly, like a distant chime. Like something else, something I could not quite remember. Straining, I sat up. Blurred, unconnected shapes swam before me. A branch? A claw? Or a blade? The broad trunk of a tree? No, it looked more like... I wasn't sure. Hard as I tried, I could not focus. Could not remember. Why was I so dizzy? Where was this place, anyway? With great effort, I concentrated on the blood-red shape that was growing steadily larger before me. It had 3 gleaming points in its center. It was round, or almost round. It was hollow, and very deep. It was a mouth. All of a sudden, my memory flooded back. The Krelix was almost upon me. I stood on the knoll, its back to the rowan's tree, its wings spread wide. Its fangs glistened, as did the sword it held in its clawed fist. My own sword! I made an effort to stand, but fell back to the ground, exhausted. The mouth drew nearer. I tried to wriggle away. My body felt heavier than stone. There was no strength left in my limbs, nor in my mind. The cavernous mouth started to blur at the edges. Everything looked red, blood red. I heard a crack, like splintering wood. The piercing shriek came again, then silence, along with total darkness. Okay, my friends, that is the end of chapter 4, and I hope you enjoyed it, and join me again tomorrow for chapter 5. Thank you guys for joining me, Golden Thorn and Mr. Bombtastic, there we go. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Have a wonderful night.